All right. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Can you all see me?
Nope. Where are you? Nope. Yep.
There we go.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Warren Astronomical Society to order. Thank you very much for joining us here at on as early as a meeting can be in the month, because it's the 1st of August. So we've got myself and several officers and about a dozen people here at Cranbrook tonight, plus all of you joining us online. Kick things off with the president's report. As you may remember, we are about to get into the busy season of doing outreach, which is, of course, one major reason why we exist. Unfortunately, an event that we were hoping to staff for Cranbrook, a nighttime event on the 11th for the peak of the Perseid shower, has been canceled by Cranbrook for quote unquote logistical reasons. So we won't be doing that with them, but Riyadh has alternate entertainment planned for the Perseid party that he will be talking about in his report. We still do have, as Bob and Adrian and Kevin will reiterate, we have the picnic coming up. It will be the same day as our normal open house, the 4th Saturday of the month. The club will be providing a main picnic food and doing the cooking. Members are asked to show up at 5 o'clock, bring things for a swap meet if you want to swap them out, bring a dish to pass. And if you are in the mood to stick around for observing, cross your fingers and hope that we have good weather. And then, of course, we have Astronomy at the Beach coming up in September, and Kevin and Adrian and Bob will all be capable of addressing that. But long story short, it is in person. We do want telescopes on the beach, just like the good old days. Other news. So after discussion at the board meeting regarding the persistence of a rather nasty variant of COVID, which is affecting at least one board member right now, and the emergence of monkeypox, we are going to have a virtual banquet again this year. I have made contact with a really cool speaker from Canada that Bob and I will be following up with, that we hope that we will be able to secure him for the banquet. It will be a real treat for you all. So we're going to have another go of a virtual banquet, and we're going to make it as fun as possible. And the raffle prizes will be real. So keep your calendars open for that Thursday afternoon, because we are going to make go of this. Regarding discussion group, we had an open air discussion group at Laura Wade's house. Thank you very much, Laura. She's here tonight. Yeah, round of applause. I hear the food was amazing. Jeff McLeod is the captain of our discussion group. If you want to host, please reach out to Jeff. He's in the back of the room. Y'all know where to reach him through the email. That we do recommend, if at all possible, let it be outdoors. So we're still trying to figure out what to do when the weather takes a turn. And that is includes our presidential business. Sorry, I'm a bit punch drunk tonight for reasons I will explain in the observing report. I will happily hand things over to Mr. Tremblay for a bit.
All right, I switched microphones. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Our speaker tonight is Jack Howard. He is a solar system ambassador. He's going to be talking about interstellar travel, so looking forward to that. We have another solar system ambassador, Tony Rice. He's going to be talking about the engineering of the James Webb Space Telescope, the 1 month long unfurlment, and why that's amazing. That will be their August 18th speaker. Jim Shedlowski on September 12th is going to be talking about space debris. And we have a University of Michigan graduate student going to be talking about exoplanets September 12th. So some interesting speakers coming up. That's it.
Sounds like a blast, Bob. Okay, over to Riyadh in the observatory chair.
Thank you, Diane. Hello, everyone. Our last observatory open house was on July 23rd. The building was opened at 6:53 p.m. We started out with mostly some clear skies and some clouds and some haze. We had roughly 14 people that attended. Around 8 or 8:30 or so, it started to actually clear up. So we had a couple of good hours of really good clear skies. So we opened the dome. We used the 8-inch refractor. We looked at a number of double stars, some deep sky objects, and towards the end of the night, we were able to look at Saturn as well. There were also a couple of telescopes outside the observatory. While we were there, the observatory committee also reviewed the cleaning of the 22-inch dab. This is something we're planning on doing, hopefully at the picnic that's coming up next month. Yeah, it stayed pretty much, like I said, clear until about 12 o'clock or so, 11:30, 12 o'clock when we closed the observatory. The next open house, which will be also our picnic, is on August 27th. And as was just mentioned, if it's going to be clear on the 12th, more than likely I'll be able to go to the observatory and have an open house for the Perseid meteor shower. So hopefully it'll be clear. If it is, we'll send out an email to everyone, maybe just a few hours before time, and we'll be out there probably around 8:30 or so. So that's all I have. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Riyadh. So 2 things to take away from that, gang. 1, Stargate is back. Open houses are being attended by the public. We are getting emails every single week from curious members of the public wanting to know when they can take a gander at our telescopes. So if you have gotten out of the habit of going to Stargate, and that includes me, this would be a good time to resume the habit of heading out there on 4th Saturdays to join Riyadh and the gang. Bring your telescope, bring your binoculars, because the public is anxious to meet us. The other takeaway is Perseid party, impromptu Perseid party. Stay tuned to MailChimp. We will be sending out an email blast the morning or the afternoon of the 12th. And again, we can descend on Stargate, join Riyadh and the gang, and see some meteors. So that sounds like a fun night for everybody. Cross your fingers the weather cooperates. With that, over to Mark Kidsier yields his time. He says secretary report is in the WASP, so we are good there. Adrian, what's up with the Treasury? Of course.
That's how I do it. All right, so I'm gonna readjust this for me. Treasury is also, the report's also in the WASP. There's we're still looking good at around 30,000 in the account, you know, including the money saved up from previous years and the donation from John Rue. I know that there are a couple of projects that are being discussed and possible expenditures, including a computer like the one we're using for these joint meeting. But we'll discuss those at our board meetings, and we'll determine, you know, where the expenditures will go. So for right now, we're doing good. The board voted on some donations to Great Lakes Association of Astronomy Clubs, as well as Macomb, and we made those deposits. And we're still looking pretty good. Any questions, you can always reach me at treasurer@warrenastro.org. And back to you.
Thank you, Adrian.
Links to our next Stargate event and our latest newsletter are in chat.
Beautiful. Thank you, Bob. Oh, now we got an echo. Okay. All right. Over to outreach. Kevin, this is always when the outreach reports get long.
We already talked a lot about the outreach already. So just to recap, the 11th August events here is canceled, kind of gets moved to the 12th at Stargate if possible. Look for the email. So we're looking for volunteers for astronomy at the beach. Right now we have 3 people. So who in this room is going to be coming? Oh, great. So I will. Huh? Okay, I will. I will get a sign up list to pass around. And I'll do that after this. And we'll be sending out an email for that in case anybody else can support it. So want telescopes at the Astronomy at the Beach, that'd be great. Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. And that means down to Dale Teamian Publications. Dale, what's the good word?
The good word is the WASP is online, as you see from Bob's link in the chat. Also, we've been getting a pretty good response for images for the calendar this year. Last call for that will be August 31st. So if anybody hasn't submitted an image yet, you still got a chance. And that's my report.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dale. Perfect segue into the subcommittees. I would like to say we are a bit ahead of the official convening of the election and nominating subcommittee. It is never too early to start thinking about if you would like to be part of the election and nominating subcommittee. It is never too early to think about serving on the board of the WAS, especially now that we're doing things again, like outreach events and meeting here at Cranbrook. Many members are term limited out, including yours truly. We will be playing our normal game of board musical chairs, but we need new people. And we also would be interested in having an AV subcommittee whose responsibility it is to maintain smooth functioning at hybrid events like this. The challenge of a hybrid event like a Cranbrook meeting or a hybrid in-person banquet, if we get to the point where we can do that, is more than double the trouble of our old method of taping and uploading meetings or the trouble of hosting WebEx. It is all the problems at once. It is fairly difficult for an active board member who needs to be doing board things like taking notes, running the treasury table, running the meeting, to be juggling that and the text. So either if you are interested in doing something like being the outreach person or program chair or something like that, that doesn't have to be doing something all during the meeting, or if you would simply like to be a standalone AV subcommittee head, we would be very appreciative of that. So anyway, reach out to us, board@warnaster.org, because Adrian and I are tearing our hair out on a regular basis whenever we're doing the tech stuff here. Okay. Nuka. Tech problems just like that. Okay. Yeah, that's why we need the AV chair.
Dan, you're already there.
Thing. The sun had plenty going on this weekend. So if you could throw a Soho image up there, we'll be good.
I got that.
Double
Hold on.
stars. Double Star will be convening when Riyadh is next at Stargate. So we may have two meetings this month if Riyadh is there for the Perseid shower, as well as at the picnic.
And we will
That's a
try
nice-
to count. We will try to count the Perseids if we can. With the full moon, of course, it's going to be a little challenging.
Nice. All right. Bob's got the images. Discussion group subgroup is captain is Jeff McLeod. See Jeff if interested in hosting an event. And that means it's time for Adrian and Astronomical League.
Oh, I'm back again. So Astronomical League, we had Alcon 2022. It was a hybrid event, just like this. And just like this, they had problems too. Their live streaming wasn't working despite the going through the same motions. Scott Roberts of Explore Scientific handled the live streaming, and at times it just didn't want to work. So Don't worry, we're not the only group out there that runs into these issues. I gave a remote talk at Alcon 22 on more Milky Way photography and looking for how precise is your Milky Way when you do Milky Way photography. And that was why I wasn't able to make the picnic, because it happened at the same time and I agreed to give the talk. So that was it was fun being a part of Alcon, even if it was kind of last minute, but I enjoyed it. So now that that's done, we're back to Global Star Party on Tuesday nights. The Astronomical League is a big part of that. They give away door prizes, or well, they draw for door prizes every Global Star Party. There won't be one tomorrow, but we're picking them up again next Tuesday. And they typically start, David, when do they typically start? Around 6 Central?
Yeah, they start around 7 Central, which would be 5 o'clock our time and 8 o'clock your time. So that, I think, is what the deal is. And
Yeah.
I did get connected after great difficulty and a whip and a chain, and I got to do my little thing at the Astronomical League. And I just
Yes.
was there when you started to do your thing. And
Yeah.
you really were getting a good start.
Yeah, we all had to wait. So bottom line, Astronomical League is still moving forward with outreach there. Like every other science group, we're slowly getting back together. We're slowly building up trust that we're not doing super spreader events. A lot of us are continuing to be cautious, and I think that's a good thing. But the other group that I'm a part of is continuing to be cautious as well. So that's it for Astronomical League. If there's any questions, those of you who are members, your membership was processed successfully. So you should be getting the reflector either electronically or in the mail. If you don't get it, let me know and I'll follow up with Astronomical League board members and find out if that's on its way. So that's it for the short, long Astronomical League report.
How about the Astro Imaging Group? I think all y'all are at the podium like that.
Yeah, let's see if I can do this. There's my image taken from years ago, and I'm actually working on the book for that. I'm having it printed.
Nice.
So a book on my time at between 2020 and 2021 at Point O'Bark Lighthouse Park, which is, when it's dark, it's a definite Portal 3 zone. It's very dark out there for Michigan. So that book is, the first draft of it is being printed. And other than that, we're just continuing to do Milky Way photography and send it in. I know, Doug, I should bring you on because you've been doing some imaging as well. It's probably a good idea to let you take over the stage.
So is this the group information or just basically imaging that we've been doing?
Subgroup stuff, and if you've got any highlights to share.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do it now then.
Sure, we should.
Okay, so I've been, we've had a lot of clear weather in the last couple of weeks or so, and actually for last month. Recently this year I've been using my 4-inch refractor for a lot of stuff, and I actually this last week put my 300 millimeter Canon prime lens I bought from Adrian last year back on the mount. So this is the setup I've got right at the moment. So a few images from mostly the 4-inch, but I got a couple recently with the 300 millimeter. So this is M11, the wild duck cluster. This is with the 4-inch. What I really liked about this was not only the cluster, but all the dark lanes, areas that showed up with this image. And then I've been working a comet for the last month using the 4-inch, and this is C 2017 K2, or Comet Pan-STARRS, that everybody's been kind of going after. And these are 5 different nights that I took, and there's an article about that in the newsletter, so you can take a look at that. That's been kind of fun to do that with the scope. Usually I use my 10-inch on comets, which gives me a little bit better resolution, but I've been working with this guy, so that's what I'll be using. I also using the 4-inch. This is the NGC 6946 or the Fireworks Galaxy, along with the cluster that's close by here, NGC 6939, with the 4-inch. And then this was the elephant trunk, or IC 1396, which the elephant trunk is right in this area. But again, what's really neat about this using the cameras that I've got with these faster systems is that I can pick up a lot of interesting dark nebula that's going on in here. There's a lot of H2 regions in there too. And then that's it.
Fabulous, Doug. Okay. With that, I think that wraps up our subgroup reports. Since my brain is fried from an early morning plane flight, I forgot to ask if there are any new people in the audience tonight here at Cranbrook. Any first? Yay, I thought we had some new faces. How'd y'all find us? Meetup, excellent. Meetup continues to pay dividends. Thank you for joining us tonight. So observing reports. I see David has both hands up, but I'm going to preempt you just this once because I have returned as of this morning from Stellafane. So this is my first time ever at the granddaddy of all amateur star parties. Stellafane, for those of you who've not heard of it, is a almost century-old star party. Its centennial will be the 2026. Hosted by the Springfield Telescope Makers of Vermont, a very weird club in the sense that they have their origin in a governor of Vermont and his side hustle is a machine shop owner. And he employed some very talented people, some of whom ended up working on the Hale telescope at Palomar. They got into the amateur telescope making gig basically in the 1920s, effectively pioneered it as a hobby, and they've been doing it for a century. So this was their first full-scale convention since COVID hit. So Jonathan, my observing partner, and I had the privilege of attending their day-long workshop on eclectic astronomy, which is a theme that is perfectly in keeping with the ethos of the WASP. And then 2 days of presentations and nights of observing on the hill, 1,200 feet above sea level up there in Vermont, with some vintage instruments, which were fabulous, and our very own pair of 8x42 binoculars, with which we successfully saw all 20 challenge objects on the binocular challenge list compiled by none other than the great Phil Harrington, who was the binocular astronomy column guy in Sky Intel and then now in Astronomy, and has been going to Stellafane for something like 50 years. So it was great. Highly recommended. It is a visual observing fiesta, so no imaging. Leave your telescope, leave your computer set up. There was some laser point activity going on, but overall it was just a very chill, comfortable, fun event. A lot of people camped. We did not camp. I'm not a camper. So we stayed at a B&B that was actually connected to the Stellafane site on a trail. Otherwise like a 15-minute drive down the road. So absolutely lovely, highly recommended. And they're gearing up for several special years to celebrate 3 centennial anniversaries of their clubhouse, and Stellafane, the convention itself. So the next couple of years up there are going to be grand. With that, oh yes, David, the keynote speaker on Thursday night at the workshop, David Sobel, spoke on the poetry of astronomy. So it was an evening of poetry. If those of you out there are astronomical poetry writers, Scientific American now runs a monthly column. So just throwing that out there. They take poetry. They get a lot of submissions, so they don't take everything. But if you are a poetic astronomer, you might find your way into print. And since you had both hands up, over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Diane. I'm delighted that Stellophane was a success. I hope that you had some observing to do. And I used to be going religiously to Stellophane each year until after 2006 or so, our own Adirondack astronomy retreat got going. And instead of just a couple of days, that lasted a week. And so we resumed our sessions as well. And I was there. Wendy couldn't make it this year, but I was there. And out of the 6 possible nights, 4 of them were really usable. I did a total of over 18 hours of comet searching. Don't really expect to find anything these days, but I love to search anyway. Just going around and letting the sky tell me what it wants to show me. For my quotation tonight, this is one of my favorites, and especially with the James Webb Telescope that's coming out with image after image. I have to quote from this again, from T.S. Eliot's Little Golden, from his 4 quartets. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Thank you, and back to you, Dan.
Fabulous. I love that quotation. All right. Any other observing reports from the gang online? Raise your hand. Been cloudy? All right. Any observing reports? I see multiple hands up. Stand up, sir. Yep. Okay. Excellent. How about you, Jeff?
It's still alive. Damn it. So
Move a little towards the, perfect. Yeah. Now they can see you.
I missed the last meeting, but about a month and a half ago, all I heard was the alignment of the planets, the alignment of the planets. And I have seen Saturn. I have seen Jupiter do some wild things. I've seen Mars in opposition. I've seen the faces of Venus, Mercury, whatever. But I started to get FOMO, as the kids say. So, and I wake up at 5 in the morning every day. I saw them. Not Mercury. But I
Lost Cranbrook.
And so I say to the guy, is this a Saturday morning out here? No. This is a huge bass tournament that's starting this morning. So I got the alignment of the planets. I went Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Moon, Venus, Mercury. I'm back up with about 50 bass boats out. So I have not the best picture in the world because I have a crummy camera phone, but maybe I'll make the calendar.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Any other observing reports? Adrian. You can just stand up.
So I've been working with a small explored scientific now. And so get over here.
Yeah, perfect.
Small explored scientific now, and I've been working with it to see how those two works. As you know, I do more imaging than anything. So I put the imaging camera away and went back to looking through the 5-inch refractor and a small little laboratory and was able to get it working finally at one of the sites my other county was Peach Mountain, where the night before there were a bunch of photographers on the hill doing Milky Way shots. So the difference was striking. We had 5 or 6 people, a lot of red lights, and a lot of people learning to take Milky Way shots. And then nothing, silence. And after repeating a couple of images that I wanted to try, I ended up pulling out the telescope and trying to remember how to observe again, or whether or not I could actually see objects. So I'm picking them out in the sky, going, let's see if this will work. To my delight, the telescope, which had failed to get anywhere close to the objects before, and it finally got close enough that it would get to the object in the wide field eyepiece that I was using. I had to remember where it was. Most of the imagers don't know where an eyepiece is, but we figured it out and put it back in. And it was honestly a blast going back around the sky again, remembering what stellar objects were there, going up the Milky Way and looking at it with my own eyes instead of the image that I usually take with it. Now, I did post on Facebook with one of the images where I was able to get a pretty detailed Milky Way, and I started looking to see if some of the images were there. And not only was I capturing a lot of dark nebulae that often go unnoticed in the Milky Way, you have all of the Messier objects starting from 20, 22, 23, 25, some NGC objects. The Triplet actually shows up. You go further along, the wild duck actually shows up. If you know where to look, you can see various dark nebulae. And when it comes to typical landscape astrophotography, most of that stuff is washed out in favor of just a simple ribbon. And you have, this is what Gary Ross would yell about. It's nothing but a ribbon in the sky. You can barely, the stars are all masked out. So part of what I've been doing lately is exploring the actual objects that are there and seeing if I can find them. So that is my observing report. I've been pretty busy because we've had good weather.
Indeed. And yeah, nothing like a good return to the joys of pure visual astronomy, photons from light years away hitting the eye, or in the case of some of those scopes at Cellophane, bouncing off a century-old mirror into one's eye, which is even more fun. All right, it is 8:03. If there's no additional observing reports from the crowd, I believe, Bob, if you are ready, I'm ready.
All right, let me get this fired up here.
All right, so
Way too many windows open.
I'll mute when we're ready. But I suppose Robert Tremblay needs no introduction to y'all,
Oh my
as he
goodness.
is our program chair. In addition to being a Michigan Tech graduate with a coterie of extremely cool Michigan Tech friends, abandoned missile range enthusiast, the social media guy for the Vatican Observatory, and a solar system ambassador, among other things. So, take it away, Bob.
1 second. Interview. Thank you. Presenter view. There we go. All right. Can you see that first slide or that second slide? There we go. Are we good?
We are good.
All right. All right. So I am Bob Tremblay, the first vice president here. I'm a solar system ambassador and been an astronomy nut since, well, I can ever remember. So, this is my third installment on the Decadal Survey. As you recall, on my other ones, the Decadal Survey is something NASA asks the National Research Council every 10 years, hey, what should we do? And they make a whole bunch of suggestions, and sometimes NASA actually does some of them. So there are three decadal surveys, and I'm covering the planetary science portion of it, and the planetary defense portion of that. So planetary defense is a global coordinated effort to track objects that could pose a threat to life on Earth and hopefully prevent that. It's also an element of NASA's planetary science endeavors concerned with human health and safety. And that's the only thing I saw in the report about that. But so the report focuses on, we need to find near Earth objects faster, and we need to model them better and handle prediction better because their orbits are completely chaotic. You need to do follow-up observations continually. We need to develop technologies to deflect these things, and I'll be talking about that. And we need methods to better prepare for, I like this, short warning times, 3 years. After Chelyabinsk in 2013, somebody asked, I think Bolden was the NASA admin then, and said, well, what would happen if we discovered an asteroid that was going to hit in 3 weeks? And his response was, pray. No, I don't want that to be the answer. So NASA's current efforts are guided by the Brown Act, excuse me, of 2005, and they require NASA to find and track all the objects greater than 140 meters. Those would be, devastating impacts. Assess their threat to the Earth and find 90% of them by 2020. Well, yeah, about that. We're not even close. We've only found a third of them by last year, so we have not made that requirement. So currently, the asteroid detection rates have been steadily increasing, and more things are coming online. And the problem is we're finding more and more of them, and even if the Vera Webb telescope comes online and only does asteroid tracking, it still won't be enough. It'll be decades before we find them all, and that's just not good enough. So here is a video. I hope you guys are seeing this video. These are showing all the asteroids that we knew about in the early 2000s, and as observation and more techniques came online, we kept finding more and more and more and more of them. So there's the asteroid belt, and those are all the asteroids that we know of. There we go. So here's the NEO, near Earth object discovery rate, and you'll notice that curve is almost exponential. We've been, as we start looking for them, we keep finding them. The red line on the bottom, these are the number of potentially hazardous asteroids that are larger than a 1 kilometer, and you'll notice that's flattened out. Yeah, we're finding very few of those. We are finding them. But why is this tool on here? There we go. Okay, so here's the asteroid count. We've got over 1 million total asteroids. The near-Earth asteroids, we're coming up on 30,000. Potentially hazardous asteroids, we got over 2,000, and those over 1 kilometer ones, we've got 151 of them so far. So that's a lot of nasty asteroids. And the thing is we are seeing impacts on everybody in the solar system, and continuing impacts. These are recent impacts on Mars observed from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and recent impacts on the Moon recorded from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. And you may remember this famous impact on Jupiter from 1994. One of the most titanic explosions ever witnessed in the solar system. So, and Earth gets its share of impacts, but we have this nice thick atmosphere. And speaking of nice thick atmosphere, here's a last month, over southwestern Michigan. These are all of the a month-long summation of all the meteors that had cameras looking at them. So if you have cameras, you will find them. Now, there's this fairly famous impact from 2013, which actually was a wake-up call. There was a whole lot of meetings and stuff after this. This was the Chelyabinsk explosion in 2013. It actually injured over 1,000 people, mostly from flying glass because they're looking out the window at this weird cloud in the sky. But it did collapse a building and it broke glass all over the place. Tunguska, 1908, flattened 80 million trees in an area bigger than Washington, D.C. And if you've never been to Meteor Crater, you should go. But if you were within 3 to 4 miles of this impact, well, that would have been bad. And this impact took place about 50,000 years ago. And there's the mother of all impacts that caused extinctions, and we don't want this. You know, I've heard it say that the dinosaurs didn't have a space program. Well, they might have had a space program, but they might have had trouble convincing the dinosaur politicians about the whole rocks from space thing. But we don't have that problem. So one of the things that's in the survey is to spend some money to replace the capacity lost by the collapse of Arecibo. Now, that's not saying replace Arecibo. That's probably build something better. Who knows? But Arecibo was doing a whole lot of NEO tracking, and we lost a very good resource there. And that's a very sad thing. So one of the things that the survey is suggesting is that NASA support the NEO Surveyor. This will be an infrared space telescope that is specifically meant to look for asteroids. It'll be an orbiter launched in early 2026, and who knows what? We don't know yet. So it's going to characterize potentially hazardous asteroids. I love this one. Study the origin and ultimate fate of our solar system's asteroids. Well, when's that ever going to end? That's never going to end. And what I'm finding most interesting is this last bit here. This find the most suitable NEO targets for future exploration by robots and humans. This brings me back to a science fiction convention I was at in 2013 when Planetary Resources was talking about asteroid mining, and somebody in the audience asked, well, okay, so you're out there mining an asteroid, and that guy shows up and says, "I want it. What do you do?" That's an unanswered question right now. Hopefully, we won't be seeing that. But so the other thing is the survey talks about is supporting the DART mission, which is actually happening right now. This is a mission to impact a space probe into an asteroid and deflect its orbit. Here's an animation. We've got Dimorphos is the large asteroid, and I think it's Dynamis is the main asteroid. Dimorphos is the satellite. And what's going to happen is in September, the spacecraft is going to plow in to the smaller one, and it is going to redirect its orbit just a little bit. Now, this animation, the change in orbit this animation shows is drastically overstated. It's only going to change at like 0.1 millimeters per second, but we'll be able to measure that. And this is going to be the first test of asteroid deflection technology. And that's happening in September. If you're curious about where that asteroid is, there's the Earth and compared to where the asteroid is. So it is a near-Earth asteroid. And my mother-in-law, when I was telling her about this mission, asked me, so when that impacts, the asteroid is not going to hit the Earth, is it? Well, space is big. No, it's not going to hit the Earth, but it's close. So you can go to the DART site and become a planetary defender yourself and get these really cool badges. So a bit of history. In 2005, we actually did hit a comet with a spacecraft, but this was not a planetary defense thing. This was more take a spectrum of the comet. But this was the Deep Impact mission, and it released a copper impactor that smacked into the comet. And I was telling my mother-in-law about this, and she said, "Why copper?" And I'm like, so I guessed. I said, well, they're taking the spectrum of the comet. Chances are there's no copper on the comet, so that they can ignore that spectrum. So I went and looked it up, and I was right. I couldn't believe it. But so Steve Collins, the long-haired NASA guy on Twitter, an acquaintance of Brother Guy and mine, he is one of the people that was directing that spacecraft. He flew that thing. And shameless plug, we actually interviewed him and talked one thing about that mission on our podcast of the Vatican Observatory. So you should go there now and listen to it. So the other thing that the survey is talking about is a rapid response. This would be for the things that less than 3 years. I wish that was less than 3 weeks, but you got to start somewhere. So essentially what they're talking about is flyby reconnaissance, something that they can do really quickly, and it will probably require something to be in a parking orbit around the Earth, and they'll send that off, or several things in different parking orbits around the Earth. But I have not seen this idea fleshed out very much. So I am a real big fan of the game Kerbal Space Program. Now this is something that they posted just recently. This just astounded me. What you're seeing here is a mothership releasing a whole bunch of mini drones, swarm control, and they all attach into the asteroid, and suddenly you have a spacecraft that you can direct from any direction. You can fly it prograde, retrograde, you can turn it, and there you go. This is just amazing. So essentially what you've done is you've attached engines all around this asteroid, and you can move it anywhere you want. I seriously think this is a great idea, and I had not seen this in any of the lists of possible asteroid deflection techniques. I think this is a great idea. So, I've been wondering about this. Of late, a lot of the large astronomical surveys have been requiring enormous amounts of data, like Sagittarius A star, where the internet was not fast enough. They had to ship hard drives by a boat because that's embarrassing. The internet was not fast enough. So we're not there for asteroids yet. But you can download the list of all the asteroids and not be able to load that into Excel because there's more than 1 million of them. So we're getting close. So there you go. Fit my granddaughter into this one too. So why am I concerned about planetary defense? Well, I was concerned about it before my granddaughter was born, but now she's given me another reason to care about the health of the Earth and its environment. And we've certainly got a nice planet. It would be a shame if anything were to happen to it. Thank you very much.
All right, anyone got questions for Bob? Questions? Okay, no questions. Let's take an 11-minute bio break. We will reconvene at 8:30 precisely for our feature presentation. See you then.
Well, I forgot to show you my first image with the 300 millimeter.
Do it. Do it.
This was 2 nights ago. That's the North American Nebula NGC 7000.
Boy, you've really been bringing the dust lanes out lately.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I think that was the only one I got. Yeah, the crescent was with the refractor. So this was with the 300 millimeter. I actually did this a year ago too, but with a different camera. Anyhow,
Remember that huge, really big star? Do you remember?
Okay, it's 8:30. We're going to start firing this up again.
Oh my gosh.
Y'all got it sorted?
Yep. And so I split the screen
Okay.
and you're all good to go.
All right, gang. All right, everybody, if we could sit down, it's 8:30, bottom of the hour. Feature presentation is about to begin. Okay, very good. I will now turn things back over to Bob Tremblay to introduce our featured speaker of the night. Take it away, Bob.
Okay, that would require me to be prepared, wouldn't it? Jeez.
Yeah, that would help, Bob.
Sigh. Okay. All right, our speaker tonight is Jack Howard, and his bio here from the WASP says NASA is returning to the moon and planning to go to Mars. Elon Musk wants to build cities on Mars, which I think is crazy. The outer solar system beckons us, and we're regularly discovering more and more planets out there, including Earth-like planets. Could we actually travel to them? We'll look at what the requirements are and consider the questions of whether we could actually do it. Jack Howard became interested in astronomy and space exploration when Sputnik was launched. Funny, we talked about that at our last meeting. Echo 1 crossed the night sky, and the race to the moon began. He earned his bachelor's in physics and math at King College, a master's degree in astronomy from James Cook University. He was a 2018 ambassador to Chile under the Astronomy in Chile Educator Ambassador Program in 2000. He started the astronomy program at, oh God, Rowan-Cabarrus. I'm screwing this up. I'm sorry.
Rowan-Cabarrus.
Thank you. Community College in North Carolina, where he teaches physics and astronomy. Since then, he's shared his wonders of space and the excitement and discovery of diverse groups in Charlotte, North Carolina area. He's a member of the Charlotte Astronomy Club, and his main interests are solar system exploration, exoplanet research, human space flight, and cosmology. Take it away, Jack.
Okay. Bob contacted me Friday, 3 days ago, and said he needed a speaker. But to put his mind at ease, this is not the fastest I've had to present a program. When New Horizons passed Pluto in 2014, our Charlotte Club asked me to give a program on that and include the latest images that came back. That was on a Friday in July. NASA released images at 1 o'clock, and I did a program at 7 o'clock. So this is a program I've done a number of times. I just pulled it out, freshened it up, 3 days notice, fairly simple. Okay. When you were talking about that Brown Act asking NASA to find 90% of asteroids out there, that reminded me of time a student asked me, how many planets are there in the solar system that we haven't discovered yet? And I thought, how do you know you've got 90%? That's actually a statistical question. For the student that asked about the planets, I gave her a decent answer. I said major planets, we would have found them. Dwarf planets, there's probably thousands out there. So when we get to the question time at the end, feel free to ask anything. There's usually a reasonable answer to it. So, okay, I'm going to try to share my screen here and get things started. Bob is going to speak up if this does not work. Otherwise, I'm going to start talking, keep going, and we will have time for questions at the end.
Well, you're good. Okay, see the presenter view? And there you go.
Okay. Interstellar travel. Is it possible? In my note to Bob, I told him the subtitle, being a father and grandfather like I am, he'll understand the subtitle is, Are we there yet? Are we there yet? We know the answer is no, and let's talk about why that is. Many of us of at a certain age, I'm not going to give numbers here, I don't want anybody to know I'm in my 70s, grew up on Star Trek, and we saw this every week, boldly go where no man has gone before. And we want to do that too. We want to go back to the moon, we want to go to Mars. When somebody told me Elon Musk wanted to send 1 million people to Mars, I thought, that's a great idea. Do we even have that many politicians? But eventually we will get boots on the ground there. We are finding planets around other stars. We would like to go there. We would like to travel across the galaxy. But can we? Let's begin with a conceptual framework. Let's think about local travel. As I was reviewing this, my wife and I were talking about our last trip through Michigan. We passed probably a little bit to the west of Warren. We went through Ohio. We veered over to Petoskey and Wicotonksing and then went up to Mackinac. But doing local travel, we all have to have a few certain things. First off, you have to have a means of getting there, a vehicle. Could we build a space vehicle? That's one question. Second concern, a big one on the ground nowadays, fuel, price of gas. Suppose we have the vehicle and we have the fuel for it. What else do we need? Well, if we human beings are going, we're going to have food, and we have to have a place to sleep. Now, could we do all of that? A vehicle, fuel for it, food for the crew, and sleeping quarters for the crew. In other words, a vehicle that can get us somewhere and we can live in. Now, with those questions in mind, think about where we might go. 25 years ago, we speculated there would be planets around other stars, but we didn't know. How far have we come? These numbers change, and every time I do a slide like this, I have to update the numbers. As of today, more than 5,000 planets, nearly 4,000 systems, more than 800 with multiple planets. Are there destinations to choose from? There certainly are. But in particular, we're looking for planets in the habitable zone or the Goldilocks zone around their parent star. We want it not too hot, not too cold. Everybody that talks about these talks about temperature, but I have to remind you, if you're scientifically literate, most of you are, you know that that's only part of the question. Not too hot, not too cold, we can have liquid water, but we also have to have atmospheric pressure. If you've ever done any hiking in high mountains or gone to Colorado, look on the side of a cake mix or something like that. It'll give you instructions for altitudes over 5,000 feet. Why is that? The atmospheric pressure is less, water boils at a lower temperature. As the pressure goes down, the boiling point goes down. If you ever get to take a spacewalk, take a jar of water with you and take the lid off with the jar pointed away from you. No water. Zero pressure, it will evaporate immediately. So we're looking for a planet not only with the right temperature, but also with an atmosphere. And we are finding these now. So this is what's driving our interest. A few years ago, you might remember the discovery of the Trappist System. 7 planets, most of them in the habitable zone of their parent star. I really love doing a talk about this one because Trappist, most people think that we come up with an acronym based on the terms that we are using. Actually, it works the other way around. A lot of people will come up with the acronym and then pick the words to go with it. Trappist was picked because it was discovered by a group of astronomers who actually are associated with the Trappist monks. And they picked that. It's transiting planet, all sorts of good stuff there. But it was really interesting. This was about 2017. And a bunch of planets in the habitable zone really caught people's attention. It turns out it's probably not a good place to go. The star is small, very hot. The planets would be very hot. But stuff like that is what really piques our interest, what really gets us going. NASA came up, or somebody came up with these travel posters, Trappist One system, planet hopping through these things. Really good idea. It's one of the nice things about NASA. It's probably the only government agency that children get interested in, and where you can actually learn something useful. So it's fun for Bob and me to be part of the ambassador program run out of JPL. Proxima Centauri, our nearest star, our closest neighbor. I say nearest star, it's the nearest star other than the sun. If you want to fool anybody with a trick question from astronomy, ask them how far away to the nearest star. Of course, the answer is 93 million miles. If you really want to confuse them, ask them how far to the nearest planet. And when they fumble around and tell you so many million miles to Mars, just look down at your feet and say, no, we're standing on it. But we have planets all over the place. We do have stars nearby. We even have star systems nearby. Now, getting there, that's another question. Proxima Centauri, a little over 4 light years away. When we think in terms of getting somewhere, we have distance, we have speed to get there, and a very simple science equation. We can figure out the time that it would take to get there. You may have seen this image. Usain Bolt, fastest human, gets there in 100 million years. Cheetah, only 38 million. That Thrust SSC is a supersonic car. It's a land speed record, broke the sound barrier on land. Could get there in under 4 million years. The Concorde, when it was flying, 2 million years. New Horizons, at its time, the fastest spacecraft we'd ever launched. That was exceeded by Juno going to Jupiter. Again, 80,000 years. And of course, if you're a Star Trek fan and scientifically knowledgeable, you'll know that when Han Solo said he made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, my only question is, did your eyes roll to the left or to the right? Because parsec is a distance, not a time. Light year is a distance, not a time. But we've got targets out there. We have the dream of going. But is that a new dream? No, it's not. There is a story that a couple of British historians came up with about a Chinese philosopher named Wan Hu. According to their version, he looked at the stars and thought of going there. The story goes that he had something like 78 rockets attached to his chair or to a throne. And the Chinese, remember, did have gunpowder, did have rockets, and that he had them light rockets all at the same time, and he disappeared. If the story is true, I doubt he made it to orbit. He was probably the first launch pad fatality. However, the problem with this story is these British historians came up with it, but subsequent historians can find nothing in Chinese records to support it. So again, all we have here is a manifestation of the interest in flying into space, whether it's historically accurate or not. Moving up into the 1800s, Jules Verne wrote From the Earth to the Moon. There have been some analogies about this thing being comparable to Apollo. The scientific problem with it is it was shot out of a cannon, and the G-forces on taking off would have been fatal. But the idea of going to the moon, again, it captures our imagination. We want to think, can we actually do that? Come along 1926, Robert Goddard. He's an American scientist. He came up with the first liquid-fueled rocket. Interesting thing about this, if you look at this image, you can find it online in a lot of places. The rocket motor was on the top, and down here he had a cone to keep all of the rest of the stuff from being burned up. One reason he did that is you're pulling all your stuff instead of pushing it. You need a very simple guidance system for that. But that started our modern age of rocketry. Fast forward to 1957, Sputnik went over. Now, after World War II, Russia, Soviet Union as it would become, and the United States became opponents in what's called a Cold War. And coming out of a wartime era, most countries, most nations were thinking in terms of military superiority, or at least parity. Now, in a classroom, I frequently ask my students, if you're having a snowball fight, do you want to be on top of a hill or at the bottom of a hill? And of course, if I say bottom of the hill, they sit there looking at me like I've got lice crawling out my ears. If I say top of the hill, every hand goes up. And when I ask why that is, they'll say, well, it's easier to throw snowballs down the hill accurately than it is up the hill. In the 1950s, we were having an arms race. The new high ground was space, and Sputnik was the first man-made object to get up there. It wasn't much, a little bigger than a basketball. It only had a radio transmitter that went beep, 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 but that beep was coming from space. And that is one of the events that spurred the American space race. Going to the moon, the Soviet Union got the first man up there, Yuri Gagarin. He was only a passenger, though. He did go into orbit, but he was only a passenger. He had no control over his spacecraft, and he didn't land with it. He parachuted out. They had an ejection seat for him. 3 weeks later, Alan Shepard went up in only a suborbital flight, but he landed with his spacecraft, and he actually had control of it for about 5 minutes. A lot of firsts happened for the Soviet Union, a lot of firsts happened for the United States, but the biggie came in 1969 when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. You probably remember many stories about that. He was landing with about 15 seconds of descent fuel left. They could have aborted and used the ascent engine, but they successfully landed. He said, Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed. Anybody my age, Bob, wave your hand again, remembers where you were when you heard this. In my case, I was underage in a bar in Mexico City. In 1969, hotels did not have telephones all over the place, TVs in every room. Mexico City, the hotel I was in, only had one TV and it was in the bar, so all the American kids were invited in to watch this historic event. But the race was on. We had landed on the moon and we kept going. We went to the moon a number of times over a 3-year period. Since then, we've never gone beyond low Earth orbit. But the dream is still there. If you grew up on Star Trek, Star Wars, or anything like that, we have to start thinking, is that possible? Is there anything in those science fiction stories that can lead us to the real thing? And in part, yes, there is. A few years ago, a local library asked me to give a talk on the physics of Star Trek, look at what's possible and look at what's not possible. And it's surprising how much actually is possible. That deflector shield around the Enterprise, could we have something like that? Actually, the answer is yes. The Earth's magnetic field is a deflector shield for our planet. And given enough energy, it would be possible to generate a magnetic field around a space vehicle of some sort. So that's possible. Weapons on the Enterprise, photon torpedoes. Could we actually have one of those? Possibly. Weapons, there are little phasers right there. I have people ask me if that stupid kid on the left is me, and I get to tell them no. The toys, yeah, that would have been me. The stupid helmet, yeah, that would have been me. The really stupid grin, yeah, that could have been me. But my mother would never give me a plaid shirt that didn't match, so let's forget about that. The Navy actually has tested laser weapons, so again, there's stuff from Star Trek that could be possible. In Star Trek The Next Generation, they had I think they actually had this in Star Trek and Star Trek Next Generation, food replicator. You punch up what you want on the menu and it comes sliding out to you. Could we do that? At the time I was researching that talk, I didn't think it was possible, but I found out, yes, 3D printing, you can print edible objects. So again, something out of Star Trek might work. Medical technology. Spock and McCoy had their little tricorder. Hold it up to your body and it tells you everything going on inside. That would be nice. Never mind that that thing Spock is holding is actually a refabricated tape recorder. It just looks good on TV. But do we have non-invasive medical technology now? Sure. Used to be you had to stick a thermometer in places that babies didn't like, more than one of them, to find out the temperature. Now you can just touch your forehead. Actually, going into an office building now, they tell you to stand in front of this little thing and an infrared sensor will get your temperature. What about your pulse, red blood count, pulse oximeter? We have CAT scans, we have MRIs, we have all sorts of non-invasive medical technology now. So there's a lot of things that we can get out of Star Trek. But here's the problem. Think back to that slide about how far and how fast and how long it takes to get there. We don't have a warp drive. Propulsion turns out to be our biggest problem. Rockets nowadays, chemical. On the left, you see the Atlas that put John Glenn in orbit. On the right, you see the Saturn V that took Apollo 11 to the moon. These rockets burn chemicals. Chemicals are expensive to produce. They are limited in quantities. So that's a drawback right there. And we still use most of that right there. In fact, chemical rockets are currently the only way we have to actually get into low Earth orbit. Now, suppose we're in space. Could we do something different? Here we've got some more possibilities. An ion thruster shoots charged particles out of an engine at very high speed. Now, this is very low thrust. To go from slow to faster takes a very long time, but it does work. This is how the Dawn spacecraft got to Ceres and Vesta, actually entered orbit, left orbit, and went to the next body. So this is something that we could do. But keep in mind, this also requires fuel. And we can put a certain amount on board, but when it's gone, it's used up. Another possibility, this was investigated back in the 60s, is a plasma thruster. Plasma is a superheated gas. That's the kind of gaseous state that we have in the sun, not just regular gas like oxygen and nitrogen that we have in our atmosphere, but superheated gases. When they're superheated, they would fly out of a chamber like that at a very high speed. This was actually developed, but it takes a tremendous amount of energy to heat a gas into a plasma state, so it has not been used in practice. Nuclear reactor, that's actually been talked about as far back as 1967. Problem with that is getting the shielding required for a nuclear reactor, getting that into orbit, tremendously heavy. If you want to build one into a submarine or an aircraft carrier, okay, fine, we do that all the time. Put that amount of weight in orbit, not so easily done. And think about this. Nice thing about nuclear reactors, you can put one in a submarine. Some submarines actually have two of them. You can put it in an aircraft carrier and you don't have to refuel that for 20 years. That sounds phenomenal when you compare it to submarines and surface ships running on diesel fuel, and you have to pump fuel into those every few weeks or every few months. 20 years sounds like a fantastic time. But what happens at the end of the 20 years? You have to bring that submarine or that aircraft carrier or whatever back into port and refuel the reactor. So again, with a propulsion system, we require fuel. That fuel is limited and has to be replenished. I hear a lot of questions about solar sails. Could they work? Short answer, yes. Light, even though photons do not have mass, they do have momentum. And a laser pointed from Earth, even though it's going to thin out and get weaker and weaker as you go farther away, could propel a solar sail. Sunlight can propel that solar sail. There's a problem with this, though. The travel is only in one direction. Now, when we think sail, a lot of people think like sailing on Earth. Around Michigan, you probably have a lot of people that like to go sailing. Great Lakes, nephew of mine did some sailing, learned how to sail a small craft in a bay up near Wikitonsi. But there's a difference. When you're sailing on water, your boat has a keel and it has something to push against, the water. That allows you to sail in any direction you want to. If you want to sail with the wind, fine. It's very obvious that works. But what if you need to turn into the wind? Could you actually sail in the direction the wind is coming from? Any sailors in the audience will tell you, yes, that's possible. It's very tedious. You have to tack left and right into the wind. But once you have your craft going, that keel is pushing against the water. So you've got two different media right there. You've got the water under the boat with the keel in the water, and you have the wind in the atmosphere propelling the sail. Now, when you get into space, we're going to replace that wind with light pressure, but we don't have anything to replace the keel and the water. So if you want to go taking off with a solar sail, fine, have fun. It was nice knowing you. This is a one-directional thing. How you could steer that, I have not seen or thought of any way that you could possibly do that. You could use another star to slow down. It might get you from point A to point B. You would have to have that other star, however, to return. And whether that would work or not, I don't know. Again, the acceleration, the speeding up is going to be a very, very slow, very tedious process. What about antimatter? Star Trek talked about this a lot. Yes, possible. Now, you know that when matter and antimatter meet, poof, everything disintegrates, becomes complete energy. So if you have antimatter, my first question to you is, what are you going to put it in? You can't put it in a glass jar. You can't put it in an aluminum fuel tank. The answer is you can contain it in a magnetic field. Antimatter has been created in particle accelerators. It has been contained briefly in magnetic fields. So is this a possible technology? The answer is yes, short answer. The problem is all of the particle accelerators in all of the world, for all of the time that we've had particle physics, they have generated enough antimatter to boil a cup of water. Accelerate a spaceship, you're going to have to scale that up in very impractical orders of magnitude, at least impractical right now. Challenge for propulsion systems, cost, huge. And we have a lot of other things here on Earth, humanitarian needs, for instance, that we have to address. Thrust, how much are you going to get? Chemical rockets give you a lot. Other technologies give you less. We'll get you there, but again, it will take time. And fuel, everything that we've talked about has to have some kind of fuel. And when I was driving from North Carolina up to Michigan, on up to the Upper Peninsula, plenty of gas stations along the way, and the cost wasn't bad back then. But when my car runs out of gas, I have to put some more in. If you're traveling to another star system, where are you going to get your fuel if you have something that requires fuel? Okay, another problem is energy. If we have humans traveling on a space vehicle of any sort, any size, energy is required to keep them warm, to take care of all of the equipment, everything like that. Here in low Earth orbit, solar energy does just fine. We've even been able to use solar energy out as far as Jupiter. But if you get farther away from that, what are you going to do? Inverse square law, the sunlight that you get drops off as the square of your distance increases. So it's handy up close to the sun. It's a problem in the outer solar system. It becomes almost impossible when you're traveling between star systems. Some people ask me about nuclear. This is one of the Voyager spacecraft, a mock-up or a picture of it. Down in the lower left, you see three little canisters out there. They're stuck out away because they produce radioactivity. They are radioisotope thermoelectric generators, if I've got my terminology correct. The plutonium in there decays, produces heat. The heat produces electricity. And NASA, when it gets something right, it gets it really right. Voyager 1 and 2 are really good examples of that. Launched in 1977. 45 years later, both of them still functioning. But they're turning off the crew, the people that monitor these are turning off scientific instruments as they need to, because the power produced by these generators is decreasing. When we were talking about propulsion, I mentioned that when you run out of fuel, too bad. This source of energy, that plutonium, will all deteriorate over time. We hope to get another 5 years or so out of the Voyager craft, but their lifetime is limited, not for propulsion, but because of the energy requirements. Now, energy in the future, what could we do? Sun, we've already talked about that. Here's the sun as seen from Mars. Can you get solar energy on Mars enough to operate rovers? Yeah, you can. We're doing better there, better technology. We've expanded to the moon, to Mars, and now on to Jupiter, but we haven't gone farther than that. As you get farther away from the sun, the source, that little spot in the sky, gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And when you get past, let's see, I think there's an image for Pluto right here, but I can't see it. Jupiter, Saturn. Oh yeah. I don't know how this is showing up on your screen in the Cranbrook room, but that's the sun as seen from Pluto. Barely different than any other star. So we're back to our problem. Getting there. Proxima Centauri, again, we'd like to get there. We'd love to have a warp drive. Now, two possibilities getting there, getting anywhere in our galaxy or to another galaxy, for instance, come out of science fiction that I get asked about a lot. And the questions are not unreasonable. A lot of people will poo-poo these two ideas, but we can't totally do that. Warp drive. Remember the Enterprise, I think, went up to warp factor 10. I think that was supposed to be 10 times the speed of light. Is a warp drive actually possible? There's a book that I could recommend. It's called The Frontiers of Propulsion Science, published by the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. If you want to read this, let me caution you that technically it is very, very heavy. There is a lot of discussion as to what a warp drive would take, and it entails concepts called negative energy and negative matter. Now, negative matter is something that regular matter, if you push on it, it moves away from you. Negative matter, if you push on it, it pushes back. Now, this sounds like wild science fiction, but about 5 years ago, I believe it was the University of Washington, actually succeeded in producing a very, very small amount of negative mass, negative matter. Negative energy, again, a concept that is difficult to understand, does occur in very small amounts. Now, the problem with a warp drive is that this involves creating a bubble of space that the spacecraft is in, and that bubble is what moves, so that the spacecraft does not violate any laws of physics as we know them. The problem is that to create this requires large amounts of negative energy. So the conclusion in this book is basically it ain't going to work. So could it be theoretically possible? Yes. Does it involve things that could actually exist? Yes. But as a matter of scale, it's simply not going to work. Now, another question I get is about wormholes. And the question here is, do wormholes really exist? And the answer to that is, it is theoretically possible, but wormholes are unpredictable. This is the mathematical theory as I understand it. This involves solutions to Einstein's general field equation for general relativity. It's mathematics so complex that Einstein had to get help with it. It involves tensor calculus, and if you know what that is, you can explain it to me. But what I understand is that according to the mathematical theory, these things are theoretically possible. However, according to that theory, they are unpredictable. They'll pop into and out of existence. They are unstable. They can collapse at any time. And the size is a problem. To get a wormhole that you could go into, the wormholes predicted by that theory are generally about the size of an atom. In the book that I just mentioned, they discussed wormholes being about the size of the nucleus of an atom. That's like 10 to the minus 16th, 10 to the minus 17th meters. And while it's theoretically possible, the biggest problem is the amount of negative equivalent mass required. One calculation in this book that I mentioned is that if you wanted a wormhole 100 meters wide, that's about the size of a football field, enough to get a fair-sized spacecraft into, the negative mass required to create that would be 71 times the mass of the sun. So again, really good science fiction, but it's probably not achievable science right now. Students ask me, but do wormholes really exist? And when I get tired of hearing that question, I pop this up and say, yeah, they do. I have one in my yard. But is there anything that we can do? There are a few things. We could scale up spacecraft that we already know how to build. This is a picture right here. It's theoretical. One very astute audience member one time pointed out to me that this is CCCP, that's Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the acronym in the Cyrillic alphabet. But could we build anything like this? The International Space Station is about 100 meters long from here up to here. Suppose we made that scaled up by a factor of 10, about 1,000 meters, 1 kilometer, half a mile. We could do that. Expensive, sure, but given time and money, it could be done. Could we rotate that to create artificial gravity? That's a piece of cake. If you want an artificial gravity of 1 g, Earth gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared, and this thing is 1,000 meters across, all you have to do is get this thing rotating once every 45 seconds. Not that hard to do. So build a craft that could take a crew over time to another star system. That's possible. What we would have to do is come up with all the ways for that to be self-sustaining. Now, think back to that time that was required to get to Proxima Centauri even. Suppose we could get this up to, let's say, 1/10 the speed of light. It would take 40 years to get there, 40 to get back. That's a human lifetime. Suppose we wanted to go to a star system 10, 20, 40 light years away. Let's say we want to go to a star system 40 light years away and we could get up to half the speed of light. That's still 80 years to get there. And that's more than a lifetime. Somebody that takes off on that mission is probably not going to return to Earth. So what are we doing? And think about this, there's no fuel along the way. This space station headed toward another star system would have to be a self-contained space colony. You're not going to get anything anywhere except some energy. You're not going to get fuel, you're not going to get supplies, you're not going to get parts. You have to be totally self-contained. And what does that mean for travelers? First of all, that thing's going to have a finite mass. It's something that we built here on Earth or in low Earth orbit or in lunar orbit, and it will not have any external resources. Think about that for a minute. You're taking off for, let's say, 20, 40, 80 years, and you're not going to get anything anywhere. If you are not a fan of recycling, this ought to convince you. You will have to recycle absolutely everything in that space station. Now, you're going to pick up a little bit of stuff here and there, maybe. Space is not a perfect vacuum. 1 cubic centimeter has 1 hydrogen atom in what is nearly a perfect vacuum. But for all practical purposes, you are going to have to conserve all of your resources. One thing we're studying in the International Space Station is doing exactly that. Recycling liquid, recycling solid. If you're thinking bathroom, that's not a bad idea. Recycling all of the oxygen. Trying to figure out how we can effectively recycle everything. You're going to have to grow your own food. You're going to have to recycle, let's just say everything and leave it at that so that you can grow more food and keep on doing that. This thing has to be a self-contained space colony for literally generations. Now, with all of that limitation, think about the number of inhabitants that space station, that moving colony, space colony can support. You're going to have to limit that. You might start off with a certain number of crew members, but ultimately you're going to have to limit the number of people that can support. Population growth is not an allowed problem. Now, if you're traveling across multiple generations, here's something that even NASA doesn't think about much: the cycle of life and death. I have been told by a professor out at University of North Dakota that NASA doesn't have any really effective plans for what happens with an astronaut dying on a mission. They've given that some thought. If the Apollo astronauts got stuck on the moon, they had a plan for that. But what about somebody on the International Space Station passing away in orbit? What about somebody on the way to Mars passing away on the trip? That is a policy issue that needs to be explored. If you are taking off for multiple generations and establishing a colony on another planet beyond Mars, what about long-term governance? Who's going to rule that? What are the rules going to be? Can the colony make up their own as they go? What are they going to do for security? As you can see, traveling to another star system involves not only technological challenges that confront us now, but traveling great distances over great long times is going to bring a lot of questions beyond the simple technology. So to kind of sum this up, the technology, we don't have it now. We have the desire. We see other planets. We see other Earth-like planets. We'd like to go there. We don't have the technology. Right now, we don't have the money. We have the dream. We don't have the technology or the money. That doesn't mean give up on the dream. It means keep working on the technology. There are a lot of really weird ideas, wormholes, warp drives, that folks have not totally given up on. But if you read this book that I mentioned to you, you'll find out they're trying to partition the development, find little pieces that where we can make advances on that. Maybe we'll be laying groundwork for future generations to build on. But when we actually have the technology, we have to look beyond that to the human factor. If we are sending humans out there, who are we going to send? How many? How are they going to survive? And what will their life, what will their culture be like in the long run? An interesting question posed to me last time I gave this talk a few weeks ago. What happens to children born into this space colony? They'll hear about Earth. They'll hear what it was like. They know that they will never see that. How do we prepare a crew for that? How do we prepare an entire colony to leave Earth, knowing that many of them will not come back? A lot of things to think about. It's not a very simple question. It's a big dream. It's been around a long time. We have just started. I used to give a talk about the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs, and I just called it Footsteps in Space. We have just taken the first steps in what we hope will eventually be a very, very long journey, but we've only taken the first steps. We have a lot of groundwork to do before we can get there. So with that, I will end the presentation. I'll open it up for questions, and I'm going to stop the sharing so that you can see my shining face again. I will ask in the Cranbrook room, Diane, if you have questions from the audience there, could you repeat those for me just so that I can make sure that I hear them clearly? And with that, I will end the slideshow and let me stop the sharing.
I'm just going to make a comment about what you said about children being born on that. I just read a science fiction book called Pushing Ice by Alistair Reynolds, and it's about humans that essentially get kidnapped, but they form a colony, and their children and next generations can't relate to human media, things like Finding Nemo. They show Finding Nemo to the children. They have no relation. It makes no sense to them. And
Yeah.
my thought about teenagers in on a colony ship. I didn't sign up for this. I want to go back to Earth. That could be bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it raises a lot of questions.
All right, gang. What questions do Micah Dowd?
Okay. Ken, do you have a question?
Come on, stand up, Mike. Okay. You want to hear more about the plan that NASA has if astronauts die on the ISS? On the moon. Oh yes, the Apollo era plan. If there were a moon fatality, could you tell us more about that?
Okay. Yeah, Diane, could you switch the camera back to you and let me see your face so I can see what you're saying as well as hear it?
Yeah.
Okay. What was that question again?
If in the event that Apollo era astronauts died on the moon, what was NASA's plan?
Okay. If this is not specifically if they died on the moon, but if for any reason they were unable to return. Suppose they tried to launch from the moon, but the engine failed. They had one ascent engine, and if it failed, you've got 2 astronauts stuck there and they're going to die there. The President of the United States, Richard Nixon at the time, had a prepared speech, which was never pulled out. But the agreement with the astronauts and NASA was that they would get to a point that they would simply turn off all transmitters to and from the moon. And this was simply to prohibit it becoming a big cry fest, can't we get them back or whatnot. And the Apollo astronauts' families understood this as well. They would simply turn off the transmitters knowing that the astronauts would be dead in maybe a day or after they ran out. That was the only plan. Now, if an astronaut died on the way, keep in mind that if they were in Apollo, they were going to return to Earth anyway. If one of them died on the moon, that astronaut would presumably be brought back to the command module and brought back to Earth. But the plan was not specifically for the death of an astronaut in flight, but what would happen if the 2 on the moon could not return. Okay, I believe Ken Heilig had a question, had a hand up. Ken, can you come back out here for us?
Yeah. Other Ken.
Yeah. Ken, if you could unmute, we'll take your question next.
Just one off the air.
All right. Other Ken.
My question is, do you believe that potentially the law of physics can be broken?
Did you get that?
No, please repeat it.
Do you believe that potentially the law of physics could be broken?
I'm not going to use the word broken. I think we can say that we will be changed in some way. An example of that is Newton's law of gravity and his laws of motion. They worked for 300 years and they still work today for motion that is very slow compared to the speed of light. When you get to very high speeds, like maybe half or 80 or 90% the speed of light using Earth as your reference frame, Newton's laws don't work. Einstein's general theory of relativity gave us the curvature of space-time as a different concept of gravity, and that works pretty well. In fact, it seems to be nearly perfect so far. Could we discover other things that allow advances in technology that we don't currently have in laws of physics? Yeah, we could discover that. In fact, science moves by figuring out things that we don't know, finding out what we don't know, and then trying to figure out answers to that. So I'd say yes. Whether it's going to be significant in terms of interstellar travel or not, I don't know, but it may well be.
What I find amazing is the amount of energy it takes to get something. Voyager sat on top of a giant rocket, and it's about the size of a small car, right? And it took a giant rocket to get that out there. Now you're talking about pushing many humans and everything it takes to
Bob,
support them.
We've lost audio in the auditorium, so we're trying to get that back. Meanwhile, yeah, we're working on getting audio back. For some reason, our audio disappeared.
Okay, Bob, building on your comment, they actually also used a gravitational boost going around Jupiter.
So, yeah, it takes a lot of energy to push stuff in space. And then when you get to the other star system, you got to slow down, and that star could be traveling at a huge velocity relative to ours.
Yeah, that's the problem getting a spacecraft to Mercury and Venus. You got to get fast enough to catch up with them, and then you have to slow down. It's an engineering and navigational challenge to do that.
All right. Any additional questions from the Cranbrook audience?
To jump one more thing, I just want to say again, the law and the speed of light be broken is what I meant by the laws of physics.
Question from Cranbrook: can the speed of light be surpassed?
Everything we know so far, and I'm going to underline so far, says no. There are some good arguments against that. Einstein made the assumption that the speed of light is the same for everybody, and information and physical objects cannot go faster than that. If you could go faster than the speed of light, you get into some contradictions that make most of us think it's not possible. You've heard of the story about, if I go back and shoot my grandparents, then I'm never born, so I couldn't go back and shoot my grandparents. That's a contradiction. My answer to that is if time travel was possible, well, if you exceed the speed of light, time travel becomes possible. And my example I like to use is if let's say I go back and visit Isaac Newton in his apple orchard, and some of the wood in one of those apple trees branch breaks off, rots, becomes dirt, gets tracked on a ship, ends up in the United States, ends up in an apple, and I eat that apple. I've got carbon atoms that belong to Woolsthorpe, and if I go back to the 1600s and visit Woolsthorpe, I've got those carbon atoms in my body, but they're supposed to be in an apple tree. How's that possible? So everything we know so far says no. However, some of the theoretical work that has been done suggests that that is actually possible. And again, this is the mathematical theory work that says a wormhole is possible. The big problem time-wise is cause and effect. You can't have. We think current perception of time is you have to have a cause before you have the effect that causes. And with time travel, you get those mixed up. Some of these mathematical theories get very convoluted, but they have found, again, mathematical, theoretically, ways around that. So you don't violate this idea of cause and effect. So the short answer is no, it's not possible. We don't have any reason to think so. But in the back of our minds, should we allow for that possibility and look for it? I don't see why not. Curiosity is what got us where we are today. Curiosity is what's going to keep us going.
Fabulous. I've never heard it expressed that way about the atoms in the apple, and I really like that image.
Yeah, that's one of
Okay.
my originals. I'm trying to get copyrighted.
Yeah, it's a very good one. Very, very clean way to conceptualize it.
Oh,
All
yeah, and
right.
it's easy to understand too.
Any other questions from the audience here at Cranbrook? All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed meeting with you.
I'm sorry?
I said thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed meeting with the group. I
Yeah,
was hoping David Levy would stay on here. I told Bob to ask David if he could remember where David and I met. I guarantee you he would not remember. He spoke at a star party I went to 20 years ago, and he and I actually talked a little bit there. As a matter of fact, this is the T-shirt from that star party.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, David, as Adrian calls him, tends to log off pretty early. But unfortunately, y'all can stay on the channel as long as the host is active. We have to clear out of our physical meeting room here. So we will be shutting down on the Cranbrook end. And this will be, if we did have a few little sound cutouts here in the studio. So do check out the archived version on our YouTube channel, which hopefully will have the full audio. But thank you again. That was great. And we'll see y'all at Virtual Macomb.
Night, everyone.
Good night.